You all remember that mobile game Vector, where you play as a black silhouette guy and parkour all across a city landscape? Well, that's not what this is. This game is called Fights in Tight Spaces, a roguelike deck builder where you take on the role of a secret agent, and you go around and shut down gangs, mafias, and the cops? Wait, whose side are we on?
I have no idea!
Right, sure. Either way, this game has been recommended to me a lot, so I finally decided to look into it. But does it really live up to all the talk? Well, let's look over the game from gameplay to difficulty to see if this game is super hard. You know, like the other game that kind of looks like it? Okay, yeah, whatever. There is no real story, like I already told you all there really is to know, so we're just gonna go straight into gameplay. Let's jump right into our first fight. Gameplay. The gameplay is pretty similar to most deck builders. False! You want to know why? Three dimensions. That's right, you have all 3 dimensions to play with, and this game is heavily focused on moving around your enemies rather than building up lots of blocks. Of course you could build block and prevent damage, but why block when you could just outplay your enemies by moving all around them so they can never hit you? Not only that, but there's lots of cards where you have to use your 3-dimensional environment to get the most out of those effects, as some can only be played when you or an enemy is next to a wall or other obstacle. So you gotta look around the room that you're stuck in and use the world to your advantage. Speaking of that, in some places you can just push people out of the room and it insta-kills them. So honestly, that's probably the best way to play the game, just move enemies out the door and see them ragdoll. In addition to that, there are little missions in each room that give bonuses based off of how fast you clear the room, and some other side quests. These range from healing, extra money, and max HP upgrades. There are a lot of things to think about, but honestly, I'm gonna talk about the best part about this game. The ragdolls. Yeah, the ragdoll physics in this game are so funny. And sure, they don't make a lot of sense, but watching your enemies just fold over like a lawn chair is the best thing ever. I will say, the main thing I have trouble with this game is the runs are so freaking long. It took me nearly 2.5 hours to get to the next to last area, and I still lost my first run. Maybe I took too long to think. Maybe it was just my dumb Magic the Gathering brain causing me to think through every situation, try to optimize the most I can. Honestly, it's probably my dumbass, but even if that was the case, say normal runs take half that time, which I hardly doubt would be that much faster, but for the sake of argument, that's still an hour and 15 minutes with 2 more areas to go. That's so long. That's some Binding of Isaac length. But the kicker is, there's no saving. There is no pass go. There is no collect $200. You can't save, so you're stuck in this long ass run, so you best be finishing before you go to dinner, else you're gonna be leaving the game open the entire time when your cat steps on the power button. Rip that run. That's my big take on the game. Oh, I guess there's also some levels where you have to protect this guy or something, but that doesn't really matter. And I'm not that good at it anyway, so we'll just skip over that part. Either way, the gameplay is very interesting using 3D space to your advantage, but the length of the game is just so long. You do get a lot of playtime out of it, so it's nice, but it's overwhelming to new players in my experience trying to figure out how to optimize your 3D space. So I will give gameplay a 4 out of 5, since my only real problem with the game is its length and how overwhelming it can be. But let's talk about the most important parts of the game, the visuals. Remember how I mentioned Vector earlier? Yeah, it looked kind of like that, except it's just the style of that guy put into a 3D space. On the surface, it doesn't really look too amazing, just very basically styled. However, where the game truly shines is bringing these fights to life through dynamic camera angles, animations, and movements to really make it feel like an action movie. John Wick, eat your heart out. After finishing a room, you could play back all your actions between you and the enemies to see this epic fight unfold. Of course, it's a little strange in this turn-based style, which makes it feel slightly less dynamic, but it's definitely still pretty cool. Besides the cool animations, I don't know if I would say the visuals stand out that much, so I think I'll give it a 4 out of 5. I'm rounding up from 3.5. But hey, the sound is even better. The music in this game is quite amazing. I really love how invigorating the music is. The music really keeps you going as you fight through waves and waves and waves and waves of enemies. And the sound effects are quite good as well, honestly. To be honest, the music is really solid, except for two things, because we can't have perfect things. One, the boss music for each area is always the same, so there's no unique boss music, which really sucks. And the fact that it's always the same gives a slight feeling of sameness to each of the bosses. Of course, they all have different mechanics and stuff, but the music is the same, so take that how you will. Number two, the music doesn't loop well. It sometimes just stops as it works on restarting the loop. You'll be in the middle of your high octane fight where you just suddenly hear nothing, and it's a bit of a letdown. But these are all not complaints about the music itself, and more how the game handles it. But these are still important things to talk about. Because of this, I'll say sound is a 3 out of 5. But let's talk about the more roguelike parts of this game, with replayability. And speaking of more roguelikes, if you're liking the video so far, and want more roguelike content, make sure you hit that subscribe and like button. The replayability of this game is honestly lacking, in my opinion. The game gives you a bunch of missions, however, all are always the same, and don't have much differences. Of course, other than the procedurally generated maps for each mission, the only difference is the decks you can play. There are a total of 6 decks, including the starter one, which gives a decent amount of variety, but with no alternate bosses, no alternate missions, or different difficulties, it's lacking in a lot of departments. Though you may unlock new cards and decks, it leaves a lot to be desired. So I think it's only fair to give a 3 out of 5 for this section. It will keep you going for a while, but compared to other games, it's average at best. But finally, let's talk about difficulty. This game is actually decently hard, especially if this is the only 3D deck builder you have ever played. There aren't many on the market either. You really find yourself having to think about maneuvering around your enemies and how to optimize your damage. I'm sure once you get used to it, it's not too bad, but it's overwhelming for new players, me included. While it does a good job of explaining itself, it's hard to fully process everything and all the options given to you. Should I reposition? Should I block? Should I take the hit? Should you just hit them? Who really knows, honestly? You need to play mental gymnastics to really get there, at least for me. So I will say, just as an entry, since it has no difficulty, it's an easy So I will say, just as an entry, since it has no difficulty, it's an easy 4 out of 5. Am I just bad? Maybe, but who knows? Do you agree with me, or do you think this game is one of the easiest roguelikes out there? Let me know in the comments. Finally, the verdict. After about 5+ hours of fights in tight spaces, I found myself overall enjoying the game. However, there's some clear flaws, but it was a lot of fun to play with. The game having a unique way of combat along with very interesting choices with its style in visuals and music. However, the flaws do really stand out, from the poor looping to its lack of replayability. And because of that, I will give fights in tight spaces a 3.5 out of 5. I really couldn't just give it a 3 or a 4 out of 5. This game is quite good and solid. I want it to lead more into 4, but there are some pretty clear flaws and lack of content, so it made me want to lean into 3. So we're gonna meet in a happy middle. I think it's honestly quite good, especially if you can get it on sale. At the full price of $25, it seems like it may be a bit much, but that's for you to decide. I am just here to equip you with knowledge and to entertain you. With that said, I think anyone who likes new takes on the deck building genre would probably be interested in this title. Also, if you want to feel like John Wick, I would recommend it. But you want to know what else I would recommend? Checking out these upcoming roguelikes. There are some really good ones in there, and I think you have to see them.